Oh, hi. Welcome to Aquatazoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about facilities teams. Now, this works a little differently from institution to institution, but what we would consider the facilities team, they tend to be the backbone of the operation that goes almost entirely unseen. Facilities teams tend to be the groups of people who are responsible for the grounds and the building, the functionality of the site, the inner workings, the outer workings. They do all of the things that make that business operate from a physical perspective. There are many teams that contribute to the full functioning operation of a zoo or aquarium, and some of them are kind of more high profile than others. So your educators they're the ones who the guests are interacting with directly and learning from. They provide those beautiful programs and give you lots of good facts about animals and good messaging and all that. You've got your retail and admissions folks who are awesome at just kind of making sure that your day goes well, that the entire process is kind of seamless, that they have the products that you need and the packages that you need and that kind of thing. And then you've got the animal care team who tend to be the ones that everybody wants to see for some reason. But we're the ones who work with the animals, right? Direct with the animals, and we have a lot of knowledge about the animals. And so we're also there trying to make sure that everybody's experience is good, but ultimately we're there for the animals, right? But then you've got this facilities team, and they are responsible for making sure that the grounds work, that the buildings are functioning, that everything is running smoothly, and you may not even notice that they're there. So what kind of jobs do these people do? This is one of those times where I like to make sure that people know that you don't have to just work in education or animal care to work at a zoo or aquarium. We need lots of types of people, right? With lots of different types of skills. So your facilities folks, and again, this depends on how the institution that we're talking about is set up, but these are the ones who could be carpenters, electricians, plumbers. They might be just like kind of general handymen, handy women, contractor type folks. They might be lab people. They might be horticulturists. They can be lots of different things, and they all kind of fall under this larger umbrella of a term generally referred to as facilities. And so these are people who have very strong physical skills in whatever their trade might be, and they're really good at getting some of this behind the scenes work done that nobody who's visiting really thinks a lot about. And that's sort of why I wanted to highlight them today, because they don't often get noticed and are not always recognized for the really awesome work that they do. But honestly, these facilities would not be able to run the way that they do in success and seamlessly if it weren't for the facilities teams. Whether you run a zoo or aquarium, you are going to have a facilities team, and what their jobs entail is a little bit different, right? So for a zoo, you might think about the expanse of the land that we're talking about, fences and walkways and all of these other physical attributes to the exhibits and the land. And also it might even incorporate some of the exhibit design itself. When you're coming up with new exhibits, you have your facilities team there as well, in addition to animal care and administration and designers and architects and all that kind of stuff. The facilities team is there as well because at some point they're going to have to make this thing work, So if you choose the wrong materials to be in sunlight all day, it's going to break down faster, right? Facilities teams know that because they're going to have to deal with it in the end. And so they have a say in the design and how this is all going to work, because they have to come to it with a practical mindset and how they're going to keep this, new exhibit, let's say, looking the way that it does on day one, as opposed to year 10. They want it to have an idea of what that preventative maintenance is going to look like. They want to know what kind of time frame we're looking at for replacing materials and making sure that the walkway is as safe today as it is 20 years from now. So it's always good to have your facilities team there. An aquarium team might look a little bit different for facilities. It might include lab folks, and it might include a little bit more as far as electricians HVAC and all the things that lead to a comfortable, good space for people and animals alike, and not to say that zoo or aquarium facilities teams can't do all of these things. They absolutely can. It's just the composition of the team is slightly different, and their skill set is going to be just a little bit different depending on the type of institution that we're talking about. So on a daily basis, they might be managing contractors. If they have run into some specialty or situation that is maybe beyond the skill set of the team that they have right then, they will be the ones getting contractors and bringing them in and staying with them and kind of going over the ins and outs of how to work in that zoo or aquarium situation, because it's a little different than like your average office building. We have to be careful of the materials that we're using and any kind of like fumes that might be happening from paints and different things like that, because they may affect guests and animals. So it's just a little bit of a different situation. They might be building some stuff. In some cases, the facilities team may also have an exhibits component to it, and not in that they're necessarily taking care of the exhibits day to day like the animal care staff would if they've got animals involved, obviously. But exhibits as in like maybe interactives and the daily operation of how people move around the exhibits and move through the space that they're kind of overseeing. And so they might be replacing things and updating stuff, new technology and that sort of thing. They might be doing some repairs, because I'll tell you, nobody is quite as hard on exhibits and interactives as zoo and aquarium guests, I swear. They love to just peel paint and rip stuff off walls and just break everything. But that's why we try to use some really tough materials that are durable and can be replaced easily, because we love our guests. They overlove some of our exhibits, and that's just part of the deal. Facilities teams are also making sure that turnstiles are working and bathrooms are working and all of the things that we use on a day-to-day basis that we don't really think about when we're using, except for if they break. Those are the things that the facilities teams are kind of keeping up with and servicing and making sure everything's running well. These teams might even include some IT and, computer savvy folks. So they might be doing some stuff with the website. They might be making sure that your admissions and retail tills are working correctly. They might be updating software in various technologies in use throughout the institution. Basically, if it's not animal care and if it's not education, the other large group of people that are working at a zoo or aquarium tend to be facilities folks. They're just making sure that the whole experience is working the way that it's supposed to, and you may not ever see them or realize what they're doing. Another big part of their work, in addition to everybody else's work, we're all trying to make sure that everything is really safe, right? And so facilities teams in particular kind of take up a good portion of the work when it comes to creating a safe work environment, because they're working on the physical spaces that encompass the zoos and aquariums, whether it's staff side, guest side, or animal side. And so they're very involved with how the operations work and what things are looking like, and kind of viewing everything with a critical eye and making changes that are needed to make sure that everybody and everything is safe. Given that the facilities team is a relatively large part of the organization and the organizational chart, it's important to highlight how this team has to work with all of the other teams. No matter what we're trying to do in our operations, whether we're changing, standard protocols, or we're designing a new exhibit, or whatever else is happening, these folks have to be involved in some capacity, if not for safety, then for just being the ones to make it happen, if that makes sense. They have to be there to kind of put their input on the table when everybody's kind of brainstorming and everything like that, and give their ideas, of course, but also offer their expertise, right? Because a lot of these folks are experts in their fields, whatever those fields may be, because facilities covers a lot, right? And so they offer their expertise in addition to animal care and education and administration and all these other groups. They have to offer their expertise as well, because more than likely no one else in those teams is thinking of this change or exhibit or new protocol, what have you. Nobody really thinks about that from the facilities perspective, except for facilities. We can guess at what they're going to like and not like and want to change and all that kind of stuff, but really you need the team there so that they can give you their perspective on things. And then we, as I'm just saying, I usually represent animal care. And I always have to remember that we're working hand in hand with facilities. We're not trying to, oppose each other, but there's a lot of friction there, right? We're trying to get things done from our own perspectives. I'm most concerned about animals and their well-being and the staff for the animal care folks, making sure that they're not going out of their way to try and maintain an exhibit from the animal care perspective. But facilities is also there trying to make sure that this is not an absolute headache for their team, And so it kind of comes out in a little bit of friction and disagreement about what's happening. But ultimately, we do have to work together, right? And we do have to come to some sort of agreement or collaborative endpoint so that everybody's maybe not thrilled with the solution, but at least we can all live with it and understand why it is the way that it is and why we're going to move forward together. It's a difficult thing to do, and I've worked at facilities where the animal care team did not get along with the facilities team very well. And honestly, that tended to happen more with leadership than the individuals involved, the team members below those managers. They all seemed to get along fine. But the managers did not get along very well together because they kind of weren't listening to each other at the time, and they're not understanding each other's perspectives. And yes, they're going to differ. And ultimately, everybody needed to be reminded of the goals that we're all trying to meet, which are the mission of the organization and, the plans that we're all trying to accomplish together. We all understand what our, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 20-year plan is. And so trying to meet those goals together without throttling each other is really helpful. On that note, I have worked at a facility before where the animal care teams and the facility teams were not getting along very well. And, animal care teams, animal care managers were trying to make changes and not involve the facilities teams because they didn't want them to know. And it ended up being really weird. Like sneaking around in the same building where all of us are, where the facilities team is and where the animal care team is, and trying to, do things secretly. And it was just very odd. And I will say, at the kind of keeper level and the technician level, we ended up starting to sneak around trying to train each other on what we needed to do. I know I personally was working with a facilities tech to learn how to do a particular operation with maintaining one of our pumps that needed it more often than others, but I couldn't depend on calling facilities to help me out because our managers were fighting. And so we had no beef with each other. We were fine, but we had to sneak away and do the training on the side where the managers couldn't see us. So they didn't know that we were working together, which was, absolutely silly when I think about it now. That should never happen. And if you're a manager and you don't get along with another manager, but your teams still need to work together, as in the case of animal care and facilities, get over it. Find a way to get over it, because otherwise you're going to force your teams to either fight or just have to do some weird tactics just to work together. And you should never be doing that under the same umbrella of the same organization. That's just goofy. But facilities teams are typically pretty brilliant. They have all these beautiful skills and all this knowledge and experience in doing the type of work that really drives them, right? They're usually doing some really interesting work that fascinates them. It may not fascinate all of us, but boy, they're good at it. They have a particular talent. It might be electricity. It might be, building carpenter type work. It might be, welding. It might be, laboratory work, right? Because facilities teams are often in charge of environmental testing, right? And that might include people forward facing stuff or animal stuff, right? So in aquariums, we test water quality. In zoos, you might be testing some air quality as well. So lab facilities tend to fall into the category of the facilities teams as well. So these people are super smart and super passionate about what they do most of the time, and they want to share their skill and they want to benefit the organization that you're all working for, and they just do so in their way, right? In animal care, it's obvious why we're there. We work for animals, we work with animals, we're passionate about animals. These folks are doing the same thing, only they're working at an animal facility and they show their work in a different way. And I feel like they're overlooked. I feel like they're kind of misunderstood, but they are brilliant folks with lots of different, techniques and training and knowledge and experience that they're bringing to the table to make the facility as great as it possibly can be. And they tend to be very busy. I feel like a zoo or aquarium never has a time where there's not projects going on. We're always trying to build new things and do new things, but also we have to maintain what we already have. When you're dealing with zoos and aquariums, it's a very harsh environment, whether you're talking about being outdoors and the sun beating down or weather beating up your stuff, or if you're in an aquarium, you might have to deal with salt water, which destroys everything. And so the materials that we're using and the application that we're putting it into tends to not last as long as the materials normally would, I would say. And so there has to be a much more vigorous method of keeping up with all of the maintenance that needs to be done. So, your pump cleanings need to happen more often, your HVAC units need to be looked at more often. All of the things, the mechanical things, just need to be serviced more often. And that includes, air filters and lights and all kinds of things. Like just the components that make up that facility, whether it's a zoo or an aquarium or some other type of related institution, the components of that building, those buildings, those grounds, like inside, outside, all of that takes much more preventative maintenance to maintain than your average office building, your average house. We're going through materials and mechanical things and technology and all of that way faster than your average business, I would say. And so the facilities team is kind of responsible for all that. Not only are they building new things and maintaining new things, they have to go back and make sure that the old stuff is still well taken care of or taken out of commission properly. So basically, it's endless work, and there are lots of team members, hopefully, for any facilities team. And so even though this one over here is responsible for water quality and primarily works for the lab, they might need to lend a hand to somebody who's building something over on this side of the building just because they're part of the same team, and one is probably their workload is waxing and waning a little bit more than the other. So, even if you're not necessarily an expert in plumbing, you may be asked to lend a hand when you work for a facilities team, and that's just how it works. We all do it for the various other teams that can kind of make up what a zoo or aquarium does every day, but it's a little more, I don't know, sensible for us because if you work in animal care, you can kind of lend a hand with other taxa or other animals, and you kind of have the same idea of what's going on. But for facilities teams, who knows what you're going to have to do because there's all kinds of expertise going on there. You might have to hold a ladder for an electrician or something like that. It's not, the end of the world, but the facilities teams wear many hats. And so that impacts what they're doing day to day. Another thing that impacts your average facility team, and I don't know if there's an average one, but the size of your facilities team matters. At my institution where I work now, there's one facilities person. Then that person has to be a jack of all trades and handle all kinds of things. And clearly, they can't do everything, and we should not expect them, nor do we expect them to do everything. And therefore, those of us who have a little bit more experience with working, in my case, in an aquarium, we try to take on more of those challenging aspects to the facilities team. And because we're just there and I can manage those vendors just fine. So if we have somebody or something to do that requires a lot more electrical expertise, for instance, than what our facilities person can do, then we'll just bring in that electrician. I'll be there with them to explain what we need and man that for them so that they can concentrate on other things and get other things done. There's always tons of stuff that needs to get done. So I, as an animal care person, an animal care manager, will go ahead and take on some of that burden because we only have one facilities person. Now, would I love more facilities people? Yes, I sure would. But, you know, it is what it is. And we just try to deal with the fact that we only have one facilities person, whereas other institutions may have an entire facilities team or multiple teams working under one facilities group. You know, that would be amazing. They'd be able to accomplish so many different types of tasks, but, you know, it depends on the size of the institution that we're talking about. We can get by with only one person. Other facilities can't get by with less than 20, you know? It all depends on the workload, the kind of work that's getting done, the expertise that is needed, and how we're going to get from point A to point B and have a fully functional institution so that our guests and our animals and our staff are all safe and everyone's having a good time. I've worked at an institution where we had lots of facilities people. We had people working in the lab. We had people working carpentry. We had on-site electricians. We had HVAC people. We had all kinds of teams that were doing things all over many buildings all the time. And it was nice because someone was always around, but it may not have been the exact person that you needed. And so that it's still just as challenging, I would say, whether you have a huge team or whether you have a tiny team. I feel like you're always going to need some facilities folks at a critical time, and they might not be available, right? So you just got to figure it out. You know, I work in animal care. I try to do the best that I can and make sure that I keep our facilities teams in mind when I have to respond to something, because I don't want to make it a bigger mess or a bigger problem for them to have to clean up just because I made a split-second decision. While I might have had the interests of myself or the animal in mind when I made my decision, if I don't think about facilities as well, I could make the wrong decision that really kind of costs them a lot of time and money, and I don't want to do that. And I would hope it would work the other way. If facilities teams are about to do something that would impact our ability to take care of the animals or the animals themselves and their welfare and things like that, I would hope that they would let us know, the animal care team know, so that we can kind of help mitigate the problems, right? And we don't want them to make any split-second decisions that are going to take us a long time to fix either. But that's part of working on a team. That's part of working in a group in the same institution, working towards similar goals, you know? Yes, we are all enjoying our own perspective on things and what we find most important and how we would prioritize things, but we also have to keep the other teams in mind, because what I might think is perfectly fine to do from an animal care perspective may actually be quite dangerous or kind of a problem that a facilities person is going to have to clean up after me. I'm not trying to do that. An example that I might have is I might give, you know, rocks or pebbles or shells to an otter. You know, otters are adorable little monsters, right? They love to shove things into holes. And so they may take those rocks and shells and shove them into a hole, which actually might be a life support pipe, right? And so I need to be mindful of that and either mitigate the possibility of any foreign objects going into the pipes of the exhibit, or I need to not give them those particular items that they could, you know, be really destructive with. This is kind of coming from a true story. Anyway, when you work with your life support team or your facilities team, which often includes a life support team when you're working in an aquarium, you need to talk about these things and make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as what to look for and how do we know when to call whom, you know, and not wait until we have no flow in the tank and the pumps are dying and everything's exploding to realize that the otters were otters and therefore shoved a bunch of rocks and shells into a pipe. while that was, I'm sure, very enriching and interesting and fun for the otters to do, and for me as an animal care person, I love that for them, right? I want them to have the most fun and enjoy what they're doing and use their natural behaviors of shoving things in holes to have the grandest time. However, that was at the expense of our life support team, our facilities team, and they have to now get those objects out and restart the entire system, probably fix some life support components and get the water flowing again, you know? And so that's kind of how this works. We got to keep the facilities team in mind when we're making decisions about what we're doing so that we do not cause them an extra headache. And sometimes it happens either way, even if we try to be careful about that. And it goes both ways, right? They also might make a mistake that will lead to a headache for animal care or admissions or administration, right? All of these things, you know, we're all teams working for the same organization. We're trying to do the right thing, but we may not always remember or be able to mitigate the problems that we're foreseeing. And we may not even notice that this is a problem. And so it's just important to remember that facilities teams are there. They're doing very critical work. They are making sure that the whole facility is functioning. And while, you know, animal care is absorbing all the glory, I guess. Coming from an animal care person, I understand people are coming in, they're looking for the animals and the animal care folks to ask them all the questions in the world. Not a lot of folks are coming in looking for the electrician and asking them all the questions in the world. So I just thought I would do an episode celebrating the facilities teams out there, however their composition works and however they operate day to day. They are super important. They make sure that everybody's safe and all of the facilities are operating well, and that not only are future improvements ready to go in hand and like under control and logical, they're also making sure that our older stuff is also still functioning properly and that our buildings will last for a long time. You know, it's a challenging environment that they're in, whether they're at a zoo or an aquarium, because guests tend to be pretty rough on stuff, as well as the environment itself, just being there, existing around animals, and in some of these extreme conditions with sunlight or with salt water, this degrades material on a regular basis very, very quickly. And so they have to be on top of that preventative maintenance to make sure that all of the components that people use every day or people see and witness every day are still functioning properly. And this team is diverse and they are tough. They are on call a lot of the time, 24/7, because if something's exploding in the building, they have to be there to like fix it or deal with it or, you know, minimize the damage where possible. And as many times as I've disagreed with a facilities person, it's not vindictive. It's not a problem. It's just that we're looking at things from two very different lenses, and we just need to come to an understanding and then collaborate to come up with like an answer that inconveniences all of us the least. So, shout out to all of the facilities teams out there. We love you. We appreciate you. Even if the guests never see you or never notice that you're doing what you're doing. And if you're visiting a zoo or aquarium and you happen to see some facilities folks out there, just understand that they're working really hard. They do what they do because they're passionate about their work. They love the facility just the same as all of our guests do, and they want you to have a seamless, fun experience where you don't have to think about all the things that are going wrong, possibly. They're trying to fix everything before you ever notice that anything was amiss, you know? And so they are the backbone of what's going on. They make sure everybody's safe and healthy and good, even if you never notice that they're there. They're the unsung heroes of the zoo and aquarium world. Okay, if you have any questions about that or any other zoo or aquarium things or leadership and management stuff, let me know. You can write it up in an email and send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget you can follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of that sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me at patreon.com/aquatazoo. And if you'd like to take a vacation and you don't know where to start, I happen to be a personal vacation advisor with Magical Vacation Planner, and I would love to help you out. It does not cost you anything extra. The links are in the show notes. Okay, thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.